Da 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 da! This episode is brought to you by Business BFFs, a podcast about being a creative entrepreneur run by SM Beiko and Claire C. Marshall. Samantha Beiko also provides editorial services through SM Beiko Publishing and is also an author of young adult fantasy. Her most recent book, Scion of the Fox, is the first of a trilogy called The Realms of Ancient, whose sequel will be out in September 2018.
Attention, citizens. It's time for Super Pulp Science.
This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. We have a triple threat guest here for the third time, Samantha Beiko, and then I also have my long-suffering co-host, Justin Curry, here with us today. Sam is an author and an editor and a impresario of the book community here in Winnipeg.
Sure.
So she's going to talk to us about a few different things today. And just to start off, Sam, last time you were here, you talked about the beginning of launching your book.
I sure did.
Yeah? You want to tell us about that?
God, how long ago was that? So it was only a couple months, right?
Yeah.
Feels like 100 years because it's over already.
It's over already.
Wow.
And when we talked, you told us how important those first few months of a book launch are.
Right.
Are they over now, those important months?
They are, although that's kind of like, catching the tail end. And I'm in a unique situation because I'm launching the sequel very soon. So the production on that is already wrapping up.
So you're going to ride the wave a little bit.
Right. So I have the opportunity to maybe extend that a bit because it's like, I'm capitalizing on the next book coming out. But then what came before the next book that's coming out? So, and that book already exists. So we can talk about that too. But yeah, so actually probably my upcoming event is next week. I'm going to the Ontario Library Association Super Conference to do a signing and to talk.
Have you ever been to that, Justin?
No, I have not.
Teach us. Oh, wise.
Teach you the ways. Well, I guess a tiny little segue is that some people don't really know that library sales and courting your librarians is actually extremely important, and it's often overlooked because it's a wide network. It's difficult to get into or to access unless you have a distributor or you have a salesperson on your team who is just focused on doing library sales, or you have a strategy in place. But library sales are more golden than bookstore sales.
Non-returnable market.
That's right,
yes.
Which I'm sure you guys have talked about a lot in the comics
we are,
side
yeah.
of
The
it.
comic book, dear listeners, the direct market in comics is a non-returnable market, meaning that stores order the copies and then they can't send them back, meaning a sale's a sale. But a regular bookstore can order 100 copies of your book and then send back 99.
Well, yeah, we've heard horror stories of 750 books going out and everything seems hunky-dory. A couple months later, 600 books come back.
Yeah. That's right, because there's no onus for the bookstore to actually put them on the shelves.
No.
They just kind of, and that's a tactic that has sunk many publishers. And listener, it sounds like, bookstores are evil. But I mean, honestly, bookstores, especially the ones that are on the moderate or indie level, are not making a ton of money. It's usually the larger conglomerates that are to blame for this because they get the deeper discounts because, when a bookstore orders a book from a publisher, they're getting it for 45 to 50% off already. Right. So there's already a lot of in-cutting, and that whole consignment system, which is publishing is one of the only industries still that operates on that, came out in the Depression, which was an effort to preserve books.
And now leads to depression.
Yeah, isn't that just hunky-dory?
It's like a perfect circle.
But I mean, the whole great thing about libraries is that it's an accessible system for all. If you can't afford to buy my book, you can go to the library and purchase it, and in Canada, I'll receive a royalty from that. From the government. Library sales, like we said, are non-returnable, and actually they will order more because there's more usage turnover. So, if someone takes up my book 10 times and the book wears out, they have to reorder it again.
Right.
Which is why my book is printed in hardcover, because the library world likes hardcovers because they last longer. So there's all these levels and different levels of things, but libraries have been so extremely supportive of my work. And I've, developed relationships with them through social media has been a huge thing. And I'd actually developed a lot of promotional materials that were just freebies to be sent to libraries to thank them, and they remember that. And so I hooked up with a lot of other library associations, like the Manitoba Library Association. I gave them a bunch of free stuff. The Ontario Library Association, that's why they're inviting me to their conference, because I developed free prints that I sent to them to one of their previous conferences that went in all of their goodie bags. And they love that stuff because then it can go out to their communities as like little gifty things.
So how many in Canada, in this network of libraries, how many libraries are we talking about? Roughly. We won't quote you on that or start a Reddit thread to
I can't really tell you
statement.
that because every single province operates with their own association. And
So each province has an association?
yes, so there's an Ontario one, Saskatchewan, Alberta, etc. And
Is there then a national library conference as well?
now, I actually looked into this, and I think that association doesn't really exist or is in a transitionary period. So a lot of them are independently. So I've just been contacting these library associations individually and asking them if they want stuff.
So what does that contact look like? Is
It's
it
literally
like-
just going to the website, and if they have a contact form or if they have an email and saying, hey, I'm an author of young adult fantasy. I had a book that just came out recently, and I have a bunch of freebie materials like coloring sheets and prints. Would your library like some? See ya.
Wait a minute. Are you suggesting that an author can work really hard on their own to increase their own sales?
Sure am, Gregory
Come
and
on.
Justin.
That's not how it's supposed to work, Sam.
Well, unfortunately, if you really want to get the best bang for your buck, you really do have to pound the pavement yourself. And, to be fair, I have also been working in book publishing for 8 years, so I have an insight into what goes behind the curtain as an author, and I know what to ask for and what's appropriate for me to just go out and do. And to be honest, my publisher is relieved that I have that initiative, but a lot of authors don't have that. So whenever I go and like do talks at conferences and stuff directly to writers and to authors, I'm always just trying to encourage them. Like, you are able to go outside the box and do your own thing. Your publisher will support you. And in fact, they want to support you because they don't have very many resources because you're not their only author oftentimes. So
I imagine like a lot of people, once they get signed with a publisher, they think, okay, I'm done now.
Right.
I just have to finish the book and then everything else is taken care of.
the old
Right?
ivory tower.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not that at all.
That's not, no.
Why I usually recommend like self-publishing a book before really going really trying to find a publisher, because you learn everything that you're going, like you still have to do all those things with a publisher.
It's like
Right.
book university.
Yeah, you
If you
need to
make
learn
your own
that on
book.
your own, and then it'll be so much better for you and your publisher once you get signed.
Yeah, because then your expectations, maybe they're a little more realistic, and then because of that, you can adapt to making your launch the best it can be based on that knowledge. So it's not necessarily like you're being undermined by your publisher. It's just that even people that I've spoken to who are published with Tor or Random House or HarperCollins, they are putting out hundreds of books a year, and they do have, a bigger team and a bigger budget, but they are still very excited when an author is like, oh, I have all these connections here, here, and here, and I'm going to mine those, because the publisher often is just strapped for time and energy. So publishing is great.
So
We love it.
great and powerful Oz sitting behind your curtain with all this knowledge about how it really works.
And I'm really small, so when the curtain
In the reveal,
it's like, oh God.
gasp, such power in
Yeah.
such a tiny frame.
That's,
You also have been on the other side from the standpoint of being a substantive editor, not just the person that checks the spelling, but the person who says, oh my God, your story needs a lot of help. You just say as if that's so simple and easy.
No, it's just because there's so many things I have to say about being an editor. But
Really?
but do go on.
Okay, so what is something that doesn't come up very often that you wish people knew about substantive editing?
Well, it's kind of encapsulated in how you preface that when you were like, oh, it's not just checking the spelling. So I've had a lot of independent clients. I've worked for publishing houses, but I've also worked for self-published people who are just like, I have a book and I'd like it to go out and be published. And I sit down with them and I explain to them, okay, if you want to hire me as an editor, there are different ways and different approaches that I can do to this. And it's all dependent on what you want and your comfort level. So there is the proofreading level where I'm just giving it a read and I'm checking for mechanics and all of the stuff that actually makes a book readable. And that's like my very base sort of Just
We
like
worked
one
together on
pass.
Rust and Water with that.
I did, yeah, where I'm just, just checking to make sure spelling, and if there's something else that I catch, like an inconsistency, I'll point it out. I'm not going to be punitive and be like, well, you didn't hire me to point that out, so you're on your own, pal. The next one is a copy edit, which is a bit deeper. It's a bit more structural, but it's still only a couple of passes, and it's still looking for those mechanics and inconsistencies. Then there's a substantive edit, which is the deep structural elbows in line edit, where you're just pulling everything out and you're suggesting cuts and you're suggesting like this doesn't work here for that character and this could go here, and you really should maybe consider starting your beginning of your book a little stronger and a little more punchy, and maybe you should delete this character altogether. And it's very, very in-depth, and I've had people hire me to do that, and they expect the proofread instead, even though I sat down with them and was
Right.
like,
So I have a question. So I was thinking about how sort of while you were speaking there, how to, like a good analogy of that in filmmaking, right? The director comes in, will call all the shots, will get as much as they can, and then there's another person who often comes in and does the edit of the film, right? So often it's the director, but it isn't always. Sometimes to save a movie, they bring in an editor who looks at all the existing footage and then can put it together in a way that saves the movie.
In fact, there was a little documentary clip about how the editing process is what saved Star Wars, the first film.
Yeah. Absolutely
It
true.
just was passed around recently. But it's just kind of like that second set of eyes, right? Like the director or the writer is really entrenched in telling their story and in all of the ways that they plan to do it. And when you have someone else come in from the outside who just kind of has a non-subjective perspective, and they can say, well, this is a good story, but here are all the different ways that you could fix it to make it a little better and make it clearer for someone on the outside, for someone who isn't close. And some people work really well with that, and a lot of people don't.
Everything's fine now.
Let's say I'm Mr. Peabody and I have my new science fiction epic.
Do you have a bow tie, or are you wearing a tweed blazer with leather
Perfect.
patches?
Mr. Peabody
That's
has
where mine
a
went.
tweed blazer and a bow tie, and he is really confident that he has written the next Lord of the Rings in space. But he has no experience in publishing whatsoever. And here's this podcast and says, oh my, maybe I need a Sam to help me with my book. How do they reach you? What's step one in that process? Is it a cold call, cold email, a tweet?
I mean, yeah, like a lot. I get client recommendations from all sorts of places. So mostly my website. People will just Google me, or they'll just Google editor, Winnipeg, editor, Canada, and I show up because I have information on what I do and books I've worked on there, and people will just send me through my contact form, and then I'll just give them the list of here are all the things that I can do for you. And I've actually done a lot of there's another level you can do too called a reader's report. It's literally just me doing a book report on your book, where someone will send me their book and I will read it and I won't touch it at all, but I'll be making notes as I'm going through it, and then I send them a book report.
That's super clever.
Interesting.
Okay, so Mr. Peabody has received your reader report, right? Let's say, for the sake of argument, that his book is sprawling, it has too many characters, and there's lots of good stuff in it, but it just doesn't come together as a story.
He's been working on this for 10 years. He wants to put every single idea in there.
Yes.
He's had. They're
We've
all
met
precious.
versions of Mr. Peabody in many.
And I've worked
encounters.
with him
You've
so
worked with him.
often.
So now Mr. Peabody's novel could be saved. Let's assume that this particular Mr. Peabody, there's a good book in there. How do
the
you break
minor.
it to them?
You just have to be really blunt. And I mean, it takes many years of developing an editor voice that is, you're there to be constructive, not hurtful.
But I'll be hurt no matter what if I'm Mr. Peabody.
I know,
won't
exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I've been in where Mr. Peabody is. I've written a book where it's perfect and none of it needs changing. And I've been slammed against the wall for it.
Oh, yeah.
And instead of receding into my Peabody shell, I turned my other cheek and said, all right, let me look at this subjectively, which takes a lot of developing coping mechanisms in general with life. But you have to always remember that any of these editorial suggestions are made with your story at heart, with your
Right.
best intentions of making it the best it can be. And if there is a book in there and you want it to come out and you want to help that person, that'll show through, your report or through any other comments that you make.
I bet that hurts a lot more too. you always meet a lot of people who just have the one book or the one story that they want to tell, and once that's done, they're done, right?
done,
Like they
yeah.
think that's it, right?
They put their hopes and dreams into this
Yeah,
one.
it's all in that one basket. So making changes on that, I imagine, hurts a lot. Like, whereas I've kind of noticed, like, I love all the stories that I'm developing, but I'm much more like versatile with them now, because I know, okay, yeah, we can make all these changes here because it's not as, they're still precious, but they're not as precious anymore. I have all these other stepping stone books coming up.
And
so
good moments that you pull out of one book, you can put in a pile and make a different story.
that idea is not going to work with this book, but I have 6 books later, it's going to work there. So
For
I don't
sure.
need to be.
And you only learn that and the ability to deal with that as you grow as a writer. You maybe you did spend 10 years on that one book and it's over, but you can't really think that it is over. You know, there's so much time and there's so much room to do other things. So, you know, when I am providing feedback to someone, I have had the responses of they won't reply to me for months. And then when they do, they're like, oh, well, I didn't really know how to deal with that at the time. Or I had to take on extra sessions with my therapist. Or they've written me long letters like, I'm so sorry I disappointed you. And that now, and especially when it's someone that's like a friend of yours and you're like, it has nothing to do with that.
Have you ever felt like you're in the position where that new author, is just asking for permission to write? Like that's...
Yeah. And you know what? I don't give anyone permission. I have had to work with clients who give me manuscripts that are rife with inappropriate stuff for whatever genre they're trying to pull off. That they're just doing it for a shock value, that it has absolutely no merit, that it's damaging to their narrative, and I have no qualms about pointing it out. And they will oftentimes respond to me with an essay-length reason of why it should be in there. And often these are independently published people, and I'm like, well, you know what, in the end, you can choose to do whatever you want, but I still have more experience than you and have read widely more of this thing that you're trying to do. And if I've noticed it, someone else is going to.
Right.
But in the end, it is up to them. And once I had a major editorial client where I rewrote his entire book. It was 480 pages because he just didn't understand the mechanics of how to write. And he received all my notes, and they were extensive. And he said, well, I just rejected all your changes, and I'm just going to do it how I want. But here's your money. And I was like, well, I mean, fine.
So somewhere in a box is a much better version of that book.
In the ether somewhere.
Okay, so a person listening to this who's not familiar with the process, it could sound like you're saying, I know more about writing in your style than you do. And I think it's good for dear listener to know that we have to separate editing and the creative process is a different thing. So you're comparing it to hundreds of books within the same genre that you've read or edited, rather than saying, I think a book should be this.
No. And often, actually, before I became an editor, I read so many think pieces back when I was 18 or 19 about being an editor, about how people were always very prickly about having an editor because they felt that there was another person coming in trying to impress their own vision on your vision.
It is scary.
And it is very scary. And a good editor, and I'm not saying all editors are angels, there are some who do that, who have their own agenda and they're trying to push it on a book that they've been given. But a good editor will go into it maybe with their own idea of, well, here's this book, and it's not the way that I maybe would have done it, but I can't really think in those terms. I have to think in terms of the mechanics sometimes of like space and time, or how you're issuing blocking to characters, or you just kind of have to think about, tools rather than ideas. And you can always, as an editor, feel free to suggest like, oh, well, I was expecting it to go in this direction, and you don't have to do that, but I'm just saying it because that was me as a reader looking at this work, and you can make that suggestion, and you have to work with the author to see if maybe it is a good direction for them to go, or maybe just if they want to go with their gut, then that's fine, but you have to be supportive of the material too.
Well, and I don't know if you remember this, but when you were looking over, you were doing edits on Midnight City, and I was turning in the second volume and talking about where the third would go, and I had lost the thread of my Lovecraftian influence, and it was starting to turn into more of a superhero like they might win.
Well, you're sitting in a room by yourself working on this. You kind of get like, blinders on.
Totally.
It's hard to see
and
the
my blinders on,
the
and
whole
I've fallen
picture.
in love with the characters in a way that was doing a disservice to the tone of the story. And you were like, no, Greg, everyone should die at the end.
In no uncertain
Right?
terms.
And it was just no uncertain terms. You're like, no, if they're, spoiler alert, if you're going to be true to the course that you set out at the beginning, you can't have a happy ending. And I stewed on that for a while. But then when I realized that you weren't saying what your idea that you presented here for the third volume is bad, you simply said, based on what you set up, something that's truer to what you already set up is this. And you were right. And so
And you
no one
and
made it out
also
alive.
with the caveat of you can choose to go that direction or not.
You did, yeah. It wasn't like
It wasn't
this
like
or
do
else.
it, Greg. And in that situation, that wasn't an independently published book. That was me working as someone for a publishing company.
Yeah.
So and that's another thing to consider, that when you are published, there is a certain vision that maybe the publisher or the company themselves might try to impress through the editorial process, and you are bound by certain things that you do have to do or maybe consider way more than you would with an independent edit, because it's really you are the publisher if you're independently publishing. So yeah, the editorial process it's made me grow substantially as a writer, I would say. And I tweeted about this yesterday, and you were like, "We're going to talk about this today," and that's actually how this conversation came up. But I said that as a writer, I figured I could never be an editor, because I've been reading all those think pieces like, what if I'm impressing the things that I want as a writer onto other writers? And that's not right, and that's not fair. But I've actually found, like, through doing it over 8 years and probably like 150 plus books later, it's had such a profound effect on me, that relationship that you develop with another writer as an editor. When you're deep into their vision, and you're both experiencing it at the same time in a parallel, and it's just so exciting and it's so great. So that it actually helped me as a writer develop a better relationship with my editors too. Because on this past book that just came out, there were 3 of them on this one book, and I've never had to do that before.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just such a really neat experience to be a part of ideas that people are so profoundly in love with, and to try and help to make it the best it can be.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
With graphic novels, especially like the way I've been working, the writing and the artwork are kind of developing alongside each other. And then a lot of times the writing is almost like the writing on top comes last. So if I were to get an editor involved with my next book, where along the process, like from roughs to thumbnails to storyboards to getting like pages finished, like where should an editor get involved? Because if it's at the very end and all that,
Good question.
like all the painting's been done already, that's, it's a lot of work. Not that writing's not a lot of work, but where should the editor
It's
get
easier
involved?
to rewrite a sentence than it is to
To reblock.
reblock an entire scene of
Yeah,
illustration.
I mean, from my experience doing comic and graphic novel editing, I would say at least, like, it was different with Greg, because Greg was kind of already. I also just was like, just Greg, I just trust you, just go. But with
Mistake number 1.
with other clients, like with script and thumbnails is probably where I would start, and even when you're scripting, you're also blocking out where everyone is, and the writing is whatever is in that script. It's not what's going to be in the published final version, because there will be times when you will have done all the painting and you've put the writing on top of it, and you're like, wow, it doesn't actually fit there anymore. You can just cut it out. And just always remember that you can be flexible with that kind of stuff. But like you said, it's a lot more difficult to change when you're like, oh, I painted it all and inked it all, and it's all done.
Yeah,
and then
that
it's
character
like,
has to be alive.
yeah,
She's
and it's like,
in
oh
that
no. And then, it'll give you a chance at the script stage to be like, oh, well, but you have this character doing this one thing, but that doesn't coincide with what he did over there. And then, you aren't caught in like an inconsistency that you can't draw your way out of towards the end. Like I just co-edited an anthology for Bedside Press, Gothic Tales of Haunted Love, and all of the work in that anthology was all original. But we were there every single step of the way. They had to hand in their script first, and then we would do edits on the script. And once the script was approved, they would go into thumbs, and then we would approve thumbs, and then we would approve pencils. And then by the time they were at pencils, it was like, I mean, inks and colors. Like that's pretty much going to be the end of it. And then we would go over again when it was final at the typesetting stage, just to make sure that there were instances like, oh, there's text just floating over there and there's no speech bubble, or that text got cut out at this one stage of the editorial, so just want to remind you it shouldn't be in there. Or if there were spelling errors or that kind of thing.
How many people were in that anthology?
There were 20.
20 stories?
There were 20 stories, and basically it was usually a team that came forward that proposed their story.
Right.
So we were just pitched stories, and that's how we accepted them.
So like maybe 2 or 3 people involved in each story.
It came to be like, okay, there was usually 2 people. Sometimes it would be one writer, and we would pair them with an artist.
Right. So you had at least what I'm getting here, driving to, is you had 40, maybe 50 or 60 people.
Plus, we would have to sometimes hire colorists and the typesetter.
So now
and
you got
maybe
70
inkers.
people.
Yeah, sure.
So you're trying to keep. If someone wants to do your job,
You're basically a project manager. You're corralling all these
what
people.
is something that you can say to them about how to manage somebody? Like Justin and I can barely manage each other and this dog in the studio, right? How do you keep 70 people?
You have to just do it project by project. You have to keep it in kind of like a microcosm and just kind of, have a chart of, well, first of all, spreadsheets are your friend. And just kind of, know who's on what team, you're constantly checking in with where they are, and you're just always making lists, and you're just always trying to keep up with it. And with that many people, you are going to miss things when you have a small staff and very few resources. But, in the end, somehow miraculously, it did come together. But you have to also set very hard deadlines. You also just can't just let people run roughshod over you. Because that's another thing. It's like, oh, well, they're trying to manage all these 70 people. Maybe I can get away with X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And there were, unfortunately, some people who thought that, and they just kept asking for extensions when they had 4 or 5 months to complete their thing, and we had to cut them because we were like, we can't make our printing deadline, so we have to say no to you now, which is unfortunate because those teams went out of their way to, a year ago, pitch us their story with their sketches and their concepts, and at the finish line, they just didn't do it. And it's very unfortunate because there were some great stories that we just had to say, well, we're not delaying publication because you couldn't get your eggs in your basket. Which is a very nice way of saying that. I didn't say it that way. I said it many more superlative curse words. And
To yourself, but then to them you send a
very
sternly
professional,
worded email.
sternly worded email. Yeah, you just also just have to be really realistic. That's another thing.
Okay, so you've got 70 people that you're managing for this project.
You just look
I'm
so
rubbing
stressed
my face
out
right now because you're managing 70 people.
And that wasn't my only project.
And this is what I was gonna. And you are not. You are the opposite of a lazy person. You've got lots of things going on. How do you? But also you have creative outputs. Like it's one thing if everything is project managing to me, right? You're just more of the same. But for you, you have to switch gears and work on a creative project, now knowing that some other savage editor is going to kick your project around the way you did to somebody else's. And ours, right, Justin? And ours still hurts.
Sorry.
How do you manage that?
Oh, man.
Like, tell me a day in the life.
Every single day is different. There's just, at the end of pretty much every day, you make a list of the things you didn't get done so that you can front load doing them the next day. And then the next day you wake up and you've got 5 urgent emails from different people that had nothing to do with that first list. And you have to add them to the top, especially depending on if it's priority. You're going to have to reshuffle all those things on the list. And you just do your best. Get up in the morning, you get down to your desk, you try and do the little things that will maintain you until your lunch break, which you have to self-enforce. And it's tough because you can sit down at that desk and you can stay there for 8, 9, 10 hours without having moved unless you have the discipline to be like, I have to get up and get some circulation in my legs, and just also back away from this because I'm getting very upset and frustrated because of, trying to herd these cats and they're not going anywhere.
Is that why you took up boxing?
I've been boxing for a long time, and it helps to mitigate some things, but it's not a cure-all.
Hey, Justin, maybe this is the time to ask. Would you two be open to a celebrity boxing match?
No.
For
because
charity?
I've never
For
actually, like, I've sparred, but not properly sparred, and I know Sam has, and
also, like,
So she would kick your
we
ass.
she would
are-
kick my ass, yes.
Also, we're not remotely in similar weight classes, so it just wouldn't.
But on the street, that doesn't matter.
on the street, don't go outside because I'll be there waiting.
Okay, we'll table that discussion until Justin's had more practice with his guard.
I really like boxing for the exercise, but it's a very different ball game when somebody's actually trying to hit you in the face. And I haven't done much of that. Just enough to know that it's a whole other thing.
Yeah, when people give you shark eyes and they just come for you and they know they have you, and you're like, well, I had a good run.
Okay, well, is this a good metaphor? This is the extended metaphor of publishing, isn't it? Right? Like writing for exercise versus writing for competition, right?
Well, and the thing about boxing is it's a very strategic game. You're constantly having to learn how to very quickly analyze your opponent and what resources you're going to be putting into getting under their guard. And it's like a dance. It's actually a very like graceful sport in a very bizarre way, especially when they slow it down and they teach it to you. And it's the same with balancing your...
And just like the ballet, sometimes there's blood.
Yeah. Oh God, there's so much blood and broken bones, and everyone just trying to smile through the horror show as you're trying to make it look effortless.
In ballet or boxing?
And all of it,
Both.
you know, especially except in boxing, there's all those like head injuries.
Okay, and sometimes you get knocked down. So let's pull this metaphor around.
Actually, I really like the analogy. I don't know where I heard it. It's years ago. A book is like a boxer. You sit in the gym and you train and train and train, but once it's out into the world, you've done all you can do, and it's up to that book now. It's up to that boxer.
Or you just trained it.
You just trained it. You were the trainer, right? And so once it's out there, you've done your
It's
thing.
got to do its own
Yeah.
fight.
You can't decide whether it's good.
And it's got to basically take whatever you put into it.
I like the thought that making a book is like a Rocky montage in the studio.
Dun, 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 dun,
I
dun.
just pictured like a little 2D book with like little boxing gloves just running down the street.
All right. Webcomic. All of us race to
Yeah,
make that
but it's true
webcomic.
because once it's out there, like you can't really do anything else with it. It's done. It's a done deal. Maybe if it gets reprinted, you can change like where some periods are and some commas. But I mean, it is what it is.
Do you ever have misplaced rage, sadness, remorse, or aggression leveled at you after a book has come out? Like if we hadn't made those changes, people would like it. And
No.
It must be your fault.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But I have.
After 150, you're doing pretty good then.
No. It's been okay. I mean, and the thing with a book or any creative project, I'm sure you guys understand that with art as well, is you could keep working on it and working on it and working on it until you're a skeleton with a beard, and then it has never come out. There is a point where you have to say, I have to let it go. And in retrospect, you can read it over or maybe look at a painting and be like, oh, I didn't do that. I missed this. Oh, my
Set
God.
a print deadline.
Deadlines,
Don't
yeah.
work on it
No.
until it's finished. Set a print deadline
And then it's finished. And then that's it. And if there were mistakes and you do a reprint, sure. Or if you're an artist, you can just pull that print and maybe redo it and re-release it. Sure. But there are infinitesimal directions you can take a story. And everyone is going to have a different perspective. Every editor is going to have different hangups, and every writer is going to have different things that are important to them. But you just have to tell the story that that was delivered by the intent of it, and then get it out there, and then it's done. And then if you didn't like it, then you just move on and write a different story. I mean, I will publish a book, and I just don't read it ever again, because I'm just like, I'm a different person now.
I know I'm human. Some of you are still human.
reprinting.
Yep.
So I had this conversation a couple times recently. When you print a book, there's a large fee associated with setup of that book, right? And it's a big chunk of money. And if things go well and that book sells out, you get to reprint the book, and that large chunk of money is then waived because they've set it up before.
Yeah.
Right. So we're approaching reprinting one of our books because things went well, which is great. But you get to change 15% of your book when you go to reprint. The printer will allow you to change some things in that reprint without charging you setup fee again. So have you done some reprinting? And if so, did you make that 15% of changes?
We're looking for free advice from normally a
Right.
well-paid editor right now.
Of course.
That's why we have her here, right?
Right. Yeah. So, dear listener, basically what happens, you send your book in, and if you have to say you have done all the setup, and then it's like, oh no, we have to replace that page. It's like $50 a page extra every single time you make a change. And when you're doing
a period, if it's a period, it's still like $50.
it's still $50
Yeah.
because they still have to reinsert a different page. And honestly, they're just doing it using like a PDF fixer on their end, but they're charging setup fee because they had to have someone change that PDF. So yeah, it's very challenging, but I've had to do different things as a publisher, where it was like, oh, the book sold out just really, really quickly, and we just really need to refulfill orders, so we'll just reprint whatever that file is in there, and then just like, okay, yep, just go get it done, and then they just reprint it. And then when you do have to make all of those changes, and oftentimes it's more than 15%.
Yeah.
Because if your book is 500 pages, that's not very much. So
If
you don't have a lot of leeway.
Technical question as well. If you go past the 15%, do they charge you like per page again, or is that setup fee kind of reintroduced?
They're charging you per page again mostly.
Okay, so it
like,
still shouldn't be quite as much as that initial setup fee.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on how much you're changing.
Yeah.
And,
Who
and
the
then
publisher is,
but
or
then
printer, rather.
then it's not a second printing, it's a second edition.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
it's a different book then. And then you have to label it as such. But yeah, you're going to be nickeled and dimed a lot. But if you have a really good relationship with your printer, don't ever feel bad about asking for stuff. For years, we didn't know this until I just started asking, like Webcom, for instance. They would give me a quote on a book, and I'd be like, yeah, can you go 20 cents below that per unit? And most of the time they say yes. They have a lot of space to do a lot of haggling and wiggle room, but people just think, oh, that quote is set in stone. So I don't really have...
Interesting, the power of a printed page for people not to ask for a different amount. Right?
Because they think that's just the way things cost. And I mean, to be fair, paper prices have gone up. A lot of major paper suppliers have actually gone out of business recently,
Right.
which have kind of...
Yeah, I've been keeping track of that too.
Yeah. And so it's just, and a lot of people are conglomerizing, and then things are just going up, and it is affecting, basic stock that people are using.
One really good way to negotiate on the price that we've found is to sit down with them and ask them, is there a time that printing this book would be more convenient for you in order to lower our price? So they can slide the printing time into a time when that machine is normally idle, but they still have to pay people to run it and maintain it. But now if it's full of actual printing job, they're happy to give you a bit of a discount if you're willing to move your release date.
Yeah.
3 or 4
And that is something, again, you always have to consider is, are they booked up? Did you schedule enough in advance? And if you're late, say on a book, you can get a 10-day turnaround. Just will cost you an extra $500+ or more. It's just like when you're an independent publisher and you know the stab of every single dollar, it's painful.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell your bookmark story with the
bookmark
printers?
story? Okay, this is a good closeout.
Yeah.
Okay. So first, before I tell my bookmark story, what I'm sensing here is that maybe there's a lot of people who don't understand all the hands that are involved in passing that book along in the big bucket before they throw it on the fire, right? To try... Right? That was a bad
Why are you
analogy. Let's
burning
not burn
books?
books. I was thinking more like how firemen form in a bucket brigade and everyone works together to stop a horrible catastrophe. But it's a bad analogy because in the end, it's a big fire and you don't want to throw your book in a fire.
And also, why are you equating your book with a horrible catastrophe?
Feels that way sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of hands. How many people would you say are involved from the distributor, like from the author to the actual retailer?
Oh my God. Immeasurable, uncountable. It takes a village to raise that book.
Like,
I would say
it's not dozens, it's hundreds.
It's hundreds. It is in the hundreds, especially if you're with a publisher that has a distributor. All the warehousing, the driving, the packing, the shipping, the buying, the salespeople going with their little suitcase in their little territory, bookstore to bookstore with a catalog, telling what books the bookstore has to purchase, because I've also worked as a bookseller having to take those sales meetings. And then, the bookseller having to enter it into their receiving and then having to hand sell it. And that's just the book selling part. That doesn't include the Amazons, the ebooks, the all of that, all the librarians.
So that's potentially now thousands.
Thousands. And then it's the readers. the readers going on Goodreads or Amazon reviewing your work so that other people will buy them. They're doing the work too for you. So it is an enormous village to get your book, out there, recognized. So you write it and you think that's it, like Justin said, and it's no. Get out of your tower. Get out of your tower. It's where the work starts. The book was the easiest part and the most enjoyable.
It's hard to hear.
Okay, well, while you're reading that book, you might need a bookmark. And so we figured out, while we were printing books. So back in my misspent youth, when I was first starting making comics, my friend Ryan Bartel brought me to the print shop that he worked at. And we made an agreement with his boss that we could work in the print shop after hours, pay only for materials. He could teach me how to do some stuff. Ryan knew his way around all the machines, so it wasn't a safety issue. And the boss just said, listen, you guys want to learn how to do this stuff? Then you do it. You pay for your materials, and that's fine. If you want to do it, at the front counter during business hours, it costs you X. If you want to do it yourself, it just costs you materials. And since I was just starting out and I wanted to know how it all worked, this is great. And the thing that really, really bothered me was that when you're trimming a comic down, there is so much waste. Like an astronomical amount of paper is just thrown away.
And then you were doing, that was small scale.
And that was small scale.
Yeah.
And I was just, but it cost the same to print that full page. And so I started suggesting that what if we printed, because you're promoting a book, you want to have postcards, you want to have bookmarks, you want to have all this stuff. I started having us lay all that stuff out in the trim area, so that the stuff that's normally garbage, right? Instead became our bookmarks and our postcards. And rather than sweep it into the garbage, we swept it into a box and then handed it out at shows. And it, to me, felt like this great cost-saving thing. So when we started printing with a major printer, I asked them about doing that. They said they'd never done it before. I showed them our layout files. They said, yeah, that's great. Instead of, 20 cents for each of these, we'll charge you 2 cents and we'll just collect the stuff. Now they offer it as a service. Now they suggest that everybody do this. And I felt like we've done our little part. But I also feel like I deserve a royalty on all of those.
Or some kind of reward.
Some kind of reward.
Yeah.
Maybe just a pat on the back knowing that a little bit less of our books ended up in the landfills.
Because just because it's the way things are done doesn't mean it, can't change.
Well, on that wise note, dear listeners, this has been Super Pulp Science, and this is Gregory Kamichuk reminding you that you should join the fight and make comics.